My interest was in medicine, but when I first tasted my first Pinot Noir from Burgundy, I decided that would be my career change, that I would focus my time on growing grapes and making wine. It was a Grand Van, 1978 Clos La Roche from Domaine du Jacques. And for me, that has been my elusive chalice, the wine that I measure all of my wines by. And so then I transferred to winemaking school and began making wine for a winery in Monterey, California, Morgan Winery. And I worked for them for 10 years before going to France and working with the gentleman who made that Pinot Noir that I first fell in love with in 1982. This vineyard is 42 hectare in total. We have almost 5 hectare, 4.7, I think. It's quite expensive to buy the land. So we're a small family winery, so it takes a lot of saving, a lot of sacrifice to grow, but for a small winery that's only 13 years of age, we have accomplished quite a lot. The consumers love Chardonnay, hate Chardonnay. It's a very trendy varietal. One year it's everybody wants Chardonnay, the next year nobody wants Chardonnay. It's fascinating, the consumer trend. But for me, I've been making Chardonnay for 26 years. This will be my 26th harvest.
Greek by birth. I grew up in Greece, and my family for generations have been farmers and grape growers and winemakers. We named this Demetria estate, Demetria being the name of my daughter, and it's also the Greek mythological goddess of the harvest. This ranch here, the Rhone ranch where the winery is, it's 200 acres, which has 48 acres of vines. It's warmer here than it is in other parts of Santa Barbara County. Here, it's about 20 degrees warmer on any given day than it is on the other location. That's why it's very conducive to grow Rhone varietals. San Ynez Valley did not really become a major player in the commercial winemaking business until the early 1970s. And then it flourished in the 80s, and then it continued to grow through the 90s and the 21st century.
And we see just across the road is Richard Sanford and Benedict Vineyard, which he planted in 1970. And that is the oldest vineyard in the valley. And it became a very well-known, successful vineyard. But no one had the idea to plant grapes here. Everybody was thinking, oh, Cabernet in Napa and Sonoma. And quietly, small producers like myself, we were having success with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay in Santa Barbara, mostly to the north in Santa Maria Valley. But then, little by little, vineyards began to be planted here. And it was right at the time that the vineyards were producing their first grapes, 2001, 2002, 2003, that the movie Sideways was released. And the success of that movie, because it was all filmed here in this valley, brought a national, international interest to our wines.
You know what? Let's take the Santa Rosa Road exit and hit Sanford first, okay?
The Pinot Noir.
What are you doing? I told you I need a drink, so I'm gonna help myself, okay, pal? What do you think? Let go of the fucking glass, fucker! Back off, Jack. Come on. Back off, man!
The headquarters of the movie site was this winery here. They a lot of the shooting took place here. And sideways, it was sort of a subliminal study of marketing of wine. They, in essence, put the area here in the map with the promotion of Pinot Noir, and it had an incredible impact.
Motherfucker! Jesus Christ!
Stephanie, shit! You're getting married on Saturday! What was all that shit you said?
Maybe even a couple of them. They gotta wait for my nose to heal first, and then they break it again.
Oh, Christ. What are you doing, Jack? Hey, whoa!
Hang on.
What the hell are you doing, Jack?
You said it looked like an accident.
What the fuck?
Doesn't look like anyone was injured in this one. You ready?
Just get it over with.
The critics of all over in Europe and here in the US, and so we've had a tremendous interest. This land, the cost has gone whew. It's not a valley because we see the mountains are right in the middle. It's almost two valleys. On the other side of the mountains is still part of the Santa Rita Hills appellation, and then some vineyards to the north are excellent.
The recognition worldwide of the Santa Rita Hills appellation really put Santa Barbara County into the world view of great wine making as it relates to, say, for example, Burgundian Pinot Noirs. And some of the world's best Pinot Noirs that are made today come from Santa Rita Hills.
We're surrounded by water on three sides, so we are on an interesting kind of peninsula. The mountains keep some of the cool weather from the north and the south away, but it opens up in the west, and so we have the fog and the cool breeze. It's nice, cool. The grapes prefer this kind of weather. It's usually by 10 or 10:30 in the morning, the fog has disappeared and it's a sunny, beautiful day, but always the breeze. It's important that with Chardonnay that it be grown in cool climate. The key is acidity for Chardonnay. It can, in warm climate, get quite rich and fat, and be more tropical fruit flavors. When we are making Chardonnay, we press the grapes right away and take away the skins, so we don't have the benefit of tannins for Chardonnay. We have to rely on the good acidity. So we harvest our Chardonnay early with low alcohol, typically 12.5% to 13%. And that's very different than the rest of California, who likes to have Chardonnay at 15% alcohol. So again, very different style for Arcadian, but I think also very interesting.
You have high alcoholic wines, and what they do is the alcohol just masks the imperfection of the wine.
The consumer in Montreal who is drinking Burgundy is interested to taste our wines because they're not high alcohol, they're not jammy, fruity candy. They're more earth and minerals, and their palate is more attuned to that.
our wines are basically more in the French style. For example, the Burgundians are more Burgundian style, in Alsatian style. As an example, our Chardonnays are not oaky and buttery. We use very little new French oak, and they're very low in alcohol, and they're very food friendly. Our Pinots, again, they're more Burgundian style, low in alcohol.
Obviously, the soil is the most important because it creates the quality of fruit. It's important to understand that there are really two types of soil. Soils that are moved by water and soils that decompose in place. Soils that are moved by water, whether it's rivers or the ocean, they have very little calcium because the water has over thousands of years washed away. Soils that decompose in place have lots of calcium because they have been absent of the water. And this is important because the calcium is one of the building blocks for tannin. If you have good calcium in your soil, you will have good tannins. The result will be that the wine will have lower pH, require less sulfur to protect it from oxidation. The color will be quite interesting, will be darker, and the wine will be healthier, ultimately. When you are growing your grapes in soils that are moved by water, there's more risk, more difficulty, and the wines are often softer. So another reason that I was so attracted to this valley, to come here and plant and make wine here.
We are a Euro-based company. The only thing that comes from the area is the wine. The equipment comes from either France, Italy, or Germany. Barrels come from France. Cork comes from Portugal. The foil that goes on top of the bottle comes from Spain. So again, the only thing that's local is the labels and the wine.
Some of it is volcanic material, and you can see because it's so old, it collapses quite easily. But then we find other pieces that are solid with good amounts of iron, which is difficult for the grapes to take up the iron, which is necessary. We all need iron. We just have an inability to keep it in our system, and the plants have the same troubles. So, but the fact that there is access to this mineral in the soil makes the wines quite interesting. Very different, less sweet, more earth, more flavors of minerals, less flavors of berries. So that's quite interesting. When I was in Burgundy, I would go to the quarries at the Haute Côte above Maurice Saint-Denis, and I could look and see the same kind of outcroppings of material. And when I seen this when I first came back to the States, I thought, wow, this could be quite interesting, possibly to make really good Pinot Noir.
We grow our grapes, we process our grapes, we age our fruit, our wines. We have our own labs, so we don't send anything out. And we also have our own bottling line, so we bottle the wine here. So we're not dependent on anybody, but on ourselves. We totally control the process from the earth to the bottle. The vineyard is biodynamically farmed. Not a science, but a way of life, a philosophy of life. Put forth or started by a professor from Austria back in the early 1920s, Rudolf Steiner. We follow the lunar calendar. You have what they call fruit days, you have root days, you have leaf days, you have flower days. And on those days, we basically spray certain preparations We do not use any manufactured organic products at all. With conventional farming, you try to cure the vine from diseases that it already has. With biodynamic farming, is what you're trying to do is try to provide the vine with the ability to cure itself.
So you can see we have completed the flowering, and now the clusters are fully developed. The set is quite good, and so I'm happy about this. We are pruning to 1 bud per spur. Here at the basal node of the cane are what we call buds. And these little buds will become a cluster of grapes. So we count how many, and we decide, okay, we want to have very good intensity of flavor, very good quality grapes. So we must be very conservative about the number of buds that we leave. If we leave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then our yields could be 80, 100 hectoliters per hectare. It's too much. To make really fantastic wine, 1, 2, maybe 3 buds at the most. We choose to leave 1, maybe 2. Now we just, to deal with the wind, because we do get some windy weather, we will bring in the shoots and put a branch lock to keep them from blowing. A lot of times the tendrils here, you see these, this will blow like this like this, and they will tie together, and then the fruit will be on top of each other. So next week we will begin the process of setting these up so that they are like this, so they can't connect. It's from the center of France, from the Allier forest. Primarily our producer is Sarug in Nuit Saint-Georges. We
age the Rhones reds into the large format barrels, the larger ones, puncheons as they call them, and the Burgundian into the conventional barrel. The Rhones are aged for 2 years to 3 years. Pinots are aged for 18 months to 2 years. Another thing is we are at the moment the only winery that uses this French concrete barrels. They perform the same function as a regular oak barrel, with the exception that you don't extract anything from this. It's neutral, and we have just the natural fruit flavors of it. And we are aging here the 4 different wide varietals of grapes that we grow on this vineyard, which is Viognier, Roussanne, Marsanne, and Grenache Blanc. And they will be blended, and then we'll have a wine that we're going to call Béton Blanc.
There are many good producers of barrels in France, of course, but I like the tightness of grain from the Allier forest, and I like the way the Sarug family makes their barrels. They're a small family, small production, so they're not making hundreds of thousands of barrels. And I have worked with their father for 25 years, so I like the family, and I like what their barrels do for my wines, and so we work with them.
On those tanks, we ferment by block and by clone. Like each block, the vineyard is broken up into blocks, and also different clones. So we ferment them separately, and we age our Pinot Noirs for 18 months to 2 years in French oak barrels, of which is about 60% new and 40% used. And then the winemaker blends those different clones and the different blocks, and it comes up with the optimum sort of blend that he thinks it's worth making for Dimitri.
It's quite important, I think, for the The transduction of oxygen to the wine at a very slow rate helps to develop the evolution of the flavors over a period of time. We spend anywhere from 18 to 24 months in barrel. And then after we bottle, then we put away in the cellar for at least 1 year before we release the wines.
Our Rhone reds are actually fermented on this French concrete fermenters. We have one for every red varietal that we have here. One is for Mourvedre, one is for Syrah, and one is from Grenache. We are the one of the 2 wineries in California that use this concrete fermenters, but they use very extensively in France and in Italy.
What's fascinating is that in its youth, it has very primary flavors, very simple flavors, but as it grows in the bottle, it gets older, the flavors become more complex. We talk about secondary evolution, and then finally, ultimately, tertiary evolution, where the wine becomes less about fruit and more about its place. And that's ultimately the most interesting. The most fascinating wines, for me, have always been older wines that have been well made from great sites and have been well taken care of during their lifetime. And we open those old wines and we go, wow, formidable. So this is the 2005 Fiddlesticks Vineyard, where we just were visiting. So I think immediately you see that this is not raspberry jam or some jelly. It's quite dark. There's more earth and minerals. And we will lose some color because the stems will absorb some of the pigments. But here we don't care so much about color. Mostly we're interested in flavor and texture. Yeah.
We have 2 Pinots, Cuvée Sandra and what we call Senorita Hills. They both come from the same vineyard, but the difference is clonal difference, the different clones. It's rich and complex wine, and it's full-bodied, and it's drinkable between now and the next 10 years.
If we were to compare Santa Barbara County to Napa Valley, there is one big difference. Here, we are small, we are family winemakers. We have a fraternal organization, and that's an important distinction between the way we think about growing grapes and making wine here.
This is our Carneros region, Sonoma Valley. Sonoma Valley is 17 miles long. It starts just down the road here and extends that direction. There are 2 parallel valleys, Sonoma Valley and Napa Valley, and they're separated by that mountain range, which we call the Mayacamas. Now we have a lot of maritime, a lot of ocean influences in this valley. We have the Pacific Ocean. The Pacific Ocean is to our west. And then the San Pablo Bay, just above San Francisco, is to our south here. The winds are channeled through this area, and then they make their way to the interior valley.
In California, Napa and Sonoma are usually distinctly different, and the Carneros region bridges that gap, which is wonderful. It's the only appellation that actually has vineyards in both.
The Sonoma Valley is unique in that there are a number of different temperatures between north and the south of the valley itself. We're in the southern part of the valley, the Carneros region, where we have a lot of influence from the ocean and the bay here, and a lot of fog. So this is a very cool part of the valley.
We're categorized as a Region 1. Not quite as cool as Champagne, but cooler than Burgundy. And this creates a very long growing season for us. We have early varieties like Pinot Noir and Chardonnay that do very well in this climate. And we have very foggy mornings and very windy afternoons. So the grapes have a difficult time achieving ripeness. And it takes a longer season to get our grapes ripe. So with the grapes hanging there for a longer time, we have more maturity, more color, more flavor that develops before the sugars come up to a point where we have to harvest. That's what makes wines that are very unique here in Carneros.
This element of fog that goes up to a level of 800 feet, and then it has this blanket of protection that keeps the vineyards cool. It cools them down at night and keeps them cool in the morning, so that during the day it can benefit from all the photosynthesis of the sun, but yet have a longer hang time so that the flavors can ripen in the grapes.
So this is very, very volcanic in nature. In the lower areas where it had once been a seabed, you have much denser soils and even a clay further down the road. So there are different types of soils. The key thing is having the right grape in the right location.
Well, the Ferrer family are originally from Barcelona, Spain. They were the ones that started Freixenet, just outside Barcelona in the Penedès region. And as early as in 1930, they wanted to establish a winery in the U.S. Unfortunately, the Spanish Civil War started in 1936, and the founder, Pedro Ferrer, went back to Barcelona, and he was killed along with his 18-year-old son. So the widow, in a great Champagne tradition, was the one that restarted the business, and at the time she had 3 daughters and a son, Jose Ferrer, and who was in his teens, and he told him, you have to fulfill your father's dream, you have to build a winery in America. In '82, they were finally able to buy this land in Carnero. There were just cows here, they had to be pushed away, and the vineyards planted. So we opened the winery in July of '86. So it was a long time between the father's dream and when the winery opened, but he was very, very proud of that fact.
So they only brought a few of their customs of winemaking to California, but otherwise absolutely respect that this is California and that they want the ultimate best of what California has to offer.
The whole idea was to make a sparkling wine from the terroir and a California true taste. Our winemaker is American, of course our vineyard manager is American, and we were not trying to bring in the 3 varietals of Cava, the Xarel·lo, Macabeo, and Parellada. We used the grapes that were more suited for this terroir. So we went with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. Total we have in the property, we have 250 acres, which is about 100 hectares. And then down the road, also in Carneros, we own another almost 200 acres or 80 hectares that have been planted mostly to Pinot Noir.
I learned how to make wine from my grandfather. He was an Italian immigrant to California, and then he passed away, and I took over the tradition of making wine for the family use only. And that was in the late 70s.
But Fred Klein's grandfather was Valeriano Jacuzzi, one of the 7 Jacuzzi brothers that immigrated from Italy in the early 1900s. And they developed the in-home spa that bears their name Jacuzzi, that everyone thinks about when they hear the name Jacuzzi, but it's a family name. And they all drank wine, and that was the important thing. Yeah.
At times, my father would say, I think, have you thought about bankruptcy? Because we weren't making any money, and I just persevered, and we finally got a break with some of our wines. It was a pretty good move because we were able to purchase this property when it was at a lull in the economic times around here, and so the property was very reasonably priced. After we were finally successful in this operation on this side of the road, I wanted to make more wines and also pay a tribute to my grandfather and my heritage. And that was why we started another winery, built it, and started this other winery called Jacuzzi. In part of these different making more wines, it wasn't just making more volume of wine, it was making different wines. So we have over 1,000 acres of grapes now, and we were selling a lot of those grapes, and we wanted to control a little bit more of those grapes instead of just selling them, is to make them into wine.
The Klein vineyards are as far as, if you look down this fence line that extends from here on the southern border to, you see where our winery is and the main road behind it? Go one further over, our vineyards stretch all the way to where you see the water over there. So this represents about 175 planted acres of grapes. From here across the road to the other side behind our Jacuzzi winery there.
We are primarily a Zinfandel and Rhone varietal producer. So we make 6 Zinfandels, 3 Syrahs, 2 Mourvedres, 1 Carignan, and a Viognier. And then in keeping with our Rhone approach, we have 2 or 3 blended red wines.
Well, this is our Carneros Cuvée, which is a very special wine that we make just a few bottles every year. And it's the 98. It's a wine that we spent almost 9 years in the caves. It's about 50-50 Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, all first press, and of course from the Carneros appellation where we are. Gloria Ferrer is named after the wife of Jose Ferrer, the one that fulfilled his father's dream, and she's alive and well. You don't have to be dead to have a winery named after you. And she very much enjoys coming from Barcelona, visiting us in Sonoma and seeing her name on the label. So on the other hand, they put a very high standards on us that we have the wife of the boss on our label. We have to make very good wines.
Making sparkling wine is a very technically demanding business, and there's a lot of very individual details that we need to keep a close eye on to make sure that everything's going well. So in here we have the ability to analyze for the sugar, residual sugar in the wine, for the acids in the wine. We do enzymatic analysis to look for different types of sugars and different types of acids that would be in the wine. We've got equipment in here to measure the amount of carbon dioxide, the amount of volatile acidity and alcohol in the wine. We measure the density of the wine.
These are Pinot Noir vines that we will use for still wines. We're going to make a red table wine out of these grapes because they're on a hillside. It's very rocky soil here. They're very stressed. The vines won't get much larger than this. This is about how big they're going to get. And right now, we are in the stage of development just after bloom. Last week, these grapes flowered, and now you're starting to see the set. You're starting to see the young berries that have been fertilized, and we always look for what we call shatter. You shake the cluster a little bit and see how many berries fall off. Not very many are falling off. This cluster will probably set very well, and we'll have a nice cluster of grapes. Soon the crew will come through and do the leafing. They'll remove all the leaves around the fruit zone and expose them to sunlight. And the more sunlight we let into this canopy, the more flavor and color that the grapes will acquire during ripening. So all this will be opened up. You'll have airflow through this canopy. If there was someone standing on the other side of the row, you could see through and see that person on the other side. So we will, within a week, start to do our leaf removal, and it's all by hand.
And then we farm organically, so the sheep and the goats help us with the weeds, and we use compost teas, and we actually grind up oyster shells for calcium. And we try to enrich in the soil and do it all organically. For us, we use drip irrigation. We're able to control the amount of water that the vines receive, but they're still, they don't have all the water that they would like. So it makes it very easy for us to control their vigor. These are Syrah here. Yeah. But then we have Merlot down the hill. On this hillside over here, we actually have Cabernet Sauvignon, Nebbiolo, and Barbera.
And most of our sparkling wines are majority Pinot Noir, so they tend to have a very high red fruit content. And for example, this one, the Sonoma Brut, is 90% Pinot Noir.
You need to be very, very gentle with Pinot and give it a lot of attention, keep a very close eye on what's going on, because it doesn't stand up to mistakes the way some other wines could. And but all of that vigilance is paid off in a very rewarding wine.
We believe that sparkling wine is not just a wine of celebration, that sparkling wine can be enjoyed anytime, all the time. In fact, it's one of the most versatile wines that you can have. So we work a lot with food in pairing, beautiful local regional cuisine here in California with our sparkling wines. And we now, do this as well with the Chardonnay and the Pinot Noir and the Merlot, our still wines.
And this is one of our very favorite sparkling wines. This is a Brut Rosé, and this is a sparkling wine. We only make about 2,000 cases a year of it, and this is one that we blend for a really nice, smooth texture, but we blend this one up in a higher fruit as well. So this comes off with a really nice black cherry and strawberry fruit on the nose, without becoming over fruity. It's always a challenge when you're working with as fruity wines as you can get in this area to not go overboard and maintain an elegant balance on it.
This is we call it our ancient vine Mourvedre because these grapes are over 125 years old, and the reason they've lasted that long is that they were planted in sand, and then when they're planted, these were just cuttings taken from Europe originally, brought to this country, and when they were planted in sand, they cannot get phylloxera, and all the other vines around California and in France, as you well know, got phylloxera and died or had to be replanted. But these in the sand, when sand dries, and it does not shrink and crack. So the part of the phylloxera life cycle, it has to travel through these cracks, and it can't do that in the sand. So these vines have been around. This has been one of our signature wines because in the United States, mainly California, there is very little of this grape had been planted. Any that had been planted were planted in areas that were stronger soils, and they, even UC Davis said this grape is not a good grape for California because it grows too vigorously. But where we're growing it in the sand, and when we find weaker areas, we can put this vine because it's so strong. This wine, you almost have to add oxygen to it or splash it when you're racking the barrels, or from the tank to the barrels or barrels to the tank. You add a little oxygen by splashing it in there to open it up more, keep it from being reduced.
Where we are in California, we're able to get our grapes ripe. It's not as cold as Champagne. We don't risk the rains that come in September, October. So our grapes can reach full maturity, and we can really pick the time that we want to pick the grapes. And in general, in California, the style tends to be that very high fruit wine that our customers like.
We do 3 different types of Syrah, 3 different wines, and this is our most expensive one. This is what we call our Carnero Syrah, and it's made entirely from these grapes behind me here. And Fred Klein, the owner, was warned, don't plant Syrah here, it won't grow, because everybody thought it was too cool of a climate. It's a climate where Pinot Noir and Chardonnay does very well. We planted Syrah here. It ripens up every year. It's probably our most intense wine we make. And we can go try it if you want. But you can see we're past the bloom period here, and we've had the grapes begin to grow in March, in sort of the middle of March, and we've had a fair amount of growth, just since the beginning of the season, and we're just done with the pollination phase. So the bloom is done, and we expect a pretty good sized crop. So these have just undergone the bloom period where the pollination occurs. And we expect a pretty good crop looking at the number of flower clusters we've had this year. This wine is the wine made from the grapes that we were just in. So where did your glass go? Right, is this you, Jacques? Look at how dark this wine is. This is one of our most intense wines. So that well-drained volcanic soil and these temperatures do well with Syrah.
This block here is all Pinot Noir, but only on the hillside we pick grapes for table wine, for still wines. Down below, in the flat areas, we have larger yields and deeper soils. We use those grapes for sparkling wine. It's much more palatable when we pick at sugars that are about 19 or 20%, as opposed to 24% sugar for the table wines.
We follow the traditional method, and the one thing that the Ferrer family imposed on us, there were 2 things: is hand picking the grapes and using membrane press, and because that way we preserve the fruit as much as possible. We bring the grapes in very small containers into the winery, and then by using a membrane press, we're not adding some sour compounds to our wine, and we're keeping the fruit as clean as possible.
We hand pick in order to be as gentle as possible with all of the grapes and avoid any damage to the fruit, any juice coming out of the grapes, to minimize any skin contact, extra skin contact with the juice. And also when we pick the grapes at night, the fruit comes in cold and the berries are firmer and maintain a better integrity. The fruit comes in better, and it's cold, and we don't have to worry about cooling that fruit down when we get it into the winery. And then we will gently press the grapes. We put them into our bladder presses, and we will rack the juice off of the solids and ferment all of those juice as individual lots. Once we have all of these base wines fermented, then we'll sit down, and it'll take us several weeks to go through and do all of our blending trials to figure out how we're going to distribute those wines among our 7 blends to maximize our quality across all of the blends, but also to maintain our stylistic character that we want to maintain in each one of those blends. The barrels that we use for the Pinot Noir and the Chardonnay that we make are all French oak barrels. We really believe that the characters, the delicate characters of Pinot Noir really benefit from the French oak that we have versus other European oak or the American oak, which sometimes is a little bit too rough for the characters that we need in the Pinot Noir. So talking about the characters that are in our wine that are reflective of both our estate here at Gloria Ferrer and also in the Carneros region. And then the texture of the wine is really important with Pinot, and that's one of our biggest challenges, is working with the texture to get that nice, smooth, silky, full mouthfeel, the tannin that goes through the beginning of the palate all the way to the end and gives you a nice, full, silky mouthfeel without getting hard or over-extracted or too tannic or bitter at the finish.
One of the grapes that is not readily available through the Old World or the European countries is Zinfandel. So Zinfandel is what I lead with when I go into a new market. And the flavor profile, the ripeness of the fruit seems to be very palate-pleasing to that European consumer. Our total business in Europe is roughly 40,000 cases, of which Sweden is roughly half of that. Undoubtedly, the wine that has done the best for us all over Europe is our red label Zinfandel.
Zinfandel is one of our more popular wines and one of the grapes that we like very well because it is more uniquely California and has some very great flavors in it that go well with lots of food, especially spicy stuff. I've had this with almost every kind of food you can imagine.
It is a cork-finished red wine that is very palate-pleasing, very fruit-forward, but not overly sweet wine for Zinfandel. It pairs well with a lot of the cuisine of Europe. And as I mentioned, we have it listed in several of the control countries, like Finland and Sweden. So it's not overly alcoholic. It's around 13.8% alcohol. Low residual sugar base, so that when you get the wine, you get beautiful soft tannins integrated into a wine that's very, very easy to drink.
There were a series of missions that stretched all the way from Southern California to the northernmost area of Sonoma. And they were all done when California was under Spanish rule, with the exception of the last mission when California was under Mexican rule. And one of the key things they did, they were all Catholic missions, is they made wine. So they had vintages here. The last mission was dedicated on our property in 1823. So their wine production started shortly thereafter. And there were commercial wineries here in the mid-1800s for sure, and maybe even a little bit before then.
The commercial wine business, I believe, thrived in California in the late 1800s. The modern sort of evolution of California wines took place, I'd say, beginning in the early 1960s to today.
So it's only been maybe 60 years. There was some wine before that, but then we had Prohibition, and nobody could make wine. And some people were making sacramental wine for the Catholic Church. So it's a very, very young history. Now we have vineyards in every state. As a nation, we are now interested. We are talking about wine in a proper context, not just for drinking at a bar, but to have with a meal at dinner. We are taking a very healthy approach to wine that has only been around 5 years. So it's quite interesting to see this evolution in my lifetime, to see how it was 25 years ago to how it is today, and exciting to see where it will be in the next 25 years.